Okay, here's the first point with Santa where things get a bit dicey. See if you can bear with us. When I met him, Santa's world revolved around Midori, who saw in Carl a prince where others saw less than that. Midori had appeared at the age of 19, and they'd been together for a few Mays and Decembers, if you catch my meaning. She was, in fact, a high school senior when they met, later an honors student in economics, and finally a rising wheeler-dealer in Tokyo financial circles. As a couple, they were beyond improbable, but however your morality judges Carl, an older American like him, when set against Japan's repressed, conforming, taciturn males, can possess a cachet unimaginable in his home country. Carl had first seen her in a Shibuya bar and asked, "What do you think about old guys?" She'd said, "As long as you can dance, it's okay." Santa danced. Midori's father, Noburo Tanaka, was a top administrator in one of Tokyo's most prestigious universities and owner of one of the largest single pieces of farmland in the Kanto area. We're talking acres and acres here. We're talking forests. The Japanese love to visit shrines. This guy had his own. His lineage went back as daimyo or samurai for 15 generations. To grasp his family's status, consider the values and social conventions of landed European gentry in the 19th century, then double the intensity. Most Japanese girls rent their 20th birthday coming-out kimonos. Midori owned hers. It set Pop back a cool 20 grand. There were 3 daughters, with a house for each one in the family compound. Carl told me. In Tanaka-san's house, Midori, as eldest daughter and chief heir, occupied the higher position than her mother. In accord with ritual, there was just one bath, or ofuro, a place of cleansing and harmony. Bathwater is shared in Japanese families, so the rule here was that Midori should bathe after her father, but before her mother. She could also dine with her father and grandparents, while her mother could not. Despite these formal affronts, her mother, in the best Japanese tradition, was reportedly the power behind the throne. Pop then was conservative. Consider the time he gathered his 3 daughters into his presence and ceremoniously announced to them how deeply disappointed he was that he had no son, and then just walked away. Tanaka viewed his wife and daughters simply as his property, and when early on he discovered Midori's involvement with Santa Claus, he was, to say the least, displeased. He called Midori a whore and reminded her, "You are my thing." Carl found a private detective camping outside his home. After a few weeks, he decided to gather up some personal information about himself, diplomas and so on, and give them to Midori to present to her father. She demurred. Finally, one day he crossed the street to the detective sitting idly in his car. "You're a private investigator, right? Well, you've been watching me for a while, and I think you've got enough information on me, so I suggest you leave. By the way, if I see you here again, I'll just pull you out of that car and kick your ass, okay?" The guy rolled up his window, started his engine, and was gone. 10 days later, Carl got jumped by some thugs in Omotesando, but he held his own. Windsor said he then called on some underworld contacts of his, something one does in Japan only as a last resort, to let Midori's father know he was not a foreign insect to be stepped on with impunity. Carl had a natural affinity for the Japanese world of secret hierarchies, veiled threats, and the posturing of men of power. This came both from a military upbringing and from his years on the street. A ceasefire seemed to be in place, but the daimyo was implacable. Midori had to move back into the family home to avoid disinheritance. We should appreciate the irony of this trio. Windsor was a broken, struggling foreigner, landless and alone. Yet this strange American was Tanaka's bane. His affair with Midori besmirched a 15-generation continuum. The patriarch's ploy was useless anyway. Now the couple just met on the sly. Yet when they escaped for vacations outside Tokyo, Carl liked to buy a local delicacy and send it to Midori's family in her name, in the tradition of omiyage. He would ask her about her grandfather's health or her mother's. He knew appropriate behavior from its opposite. He quickly appraised character and perceived motivation. Still, his tales tended to reveal that understanding is one thing, behavior another. Santa de la Rue. There had been times when home was a cardboard box in Yoyogi Park, where drug deals were what kept him alive, where cries of unseen men set upon by thugs in parks chilled him closer to the bone than the cold air. Later, when things got tough again, he'd tell me, "I can't go back to the park, man. I just can't go back there again." Or he'd have a street stand in Omotesando selling watches. Even then, Windsor had his connections. Once a local Yakuza got in his face for a standard shakedown fee. Carl quietly explained to the young gangster that his boss wouldn't like him doing that. He told the enforcer to drop a dime to find out. Apparently, Carl had helped the mob boss's wife with her English a couple times. The young thug came back groveling, asking if he could buy Carl dinner. Yet another time, I drove through Roppongi with him, and he tilted his seat back and ducked below window level, seeking invisibility on the small chance an old enemy might see him. "Look out for a guy with orange hair," he muttered. Before the cardboard house era, Carl lived in a building near Shibuya. The owners had gotten bankrupt, and the police had put up yellow "Do Not Enter" signs. Instead, the Yakuza took over and rented all the apartments out cut rate. Carl moved in. Iranians moved in. It was a total underground scene. One night, the police came to bust the Iranians. The cops blew right by crashed-out squatters holding cocaine and weed to get to the Iranians. They wanted their 10,000 yen counterfeit telephone cards, a big business in Tokyo at that time that used to play havoc with NTT revenues. The Yakuza made them, the Iranians sold them. That was an inviolable rule, confirmed when two Iranian wise guys decided to steal a counterfeiting machine. They wound up as suicide partners who jumped off a building together in Kanda. Strangely, when they hit the ground, their throats were slit all the way through. Some kind of mid-air Islamic ritual? Carl talked it over later with a street cop. "Hey, how'd those Iranians get their throat cut like that?" "I don't know, but they were suicide," responded the cop dismissively. "Anyway, it doesn't matter. They were just Iranians."